Good morning. Thank you for being out here this morning. I know that you're probably looking at the weather and thinking of other things that you could be doing, but your presence is an acknowledgement of the importance of the work that we're doing here today, and I'm guessing it's an acknowledgement to me as well, or to us, of how important things are to you at this point in your own processes on the discernment teams. So thank you again for all the work that you've been doing these last several months and for the work that remains to be done and the faithfulness with which you're executing it. I think I want to do two things here at the three really at the outset. One is to brief you on the little index cards that you just got so that you don't spend any more time thinking about them the wrong way. The next thing I want to do is ask for just name, ID, and serial number of each of the people at the table here so you have an idea of how we all fit together up front. And then the final thing is I will pass off the microphone to Bill Peck, who will give us a brief statement of the morning just for the sake of setting the tone. So, item one, you have pink, yellow, white. The color does not matter. The print does not matter either. These are cards that were left over. Yeah, raise your hands if you don't have any index cards. Okay. John, will you do me a favor?
Sure. Lee?
See to it that people who don't have them have some. The print is left over simply from the days of Presbytery when we registered everybody card by card for their attendance at the Presbytery meetings. After the printer did a big run, the Presbytery flipped and stopped registering people that way and found new ways to register people, and we have cards left over, which make great note paper on the side that isn't printed on. So the side that matters to you is the blank one. This is how we're going to handle the Q&As this morning. So as you have questions, write them one question per card on the cards. If you need more cards, we've got plenty. And we'll ask at regular intervals that those be passed to the aisles and passed in so that we can put those questions then to the panelists. Make sense? Okay. So you no longer have to wonder why you're being asked to register again. That having been said, I'd like to start at the far end of the table just so people can know who you are and how you fit in here to the conversation this morning. So if you'll let us know, sir, your name and by what virtue your presence here is sought.
For lack thereof.
And use the microphones if you will.
Good morning, Jack Clement. I'm the moderator of Committee on Ministry and also the convener of the Response Coordinating Team.
Candy Blankman, I'm on the Committee on Ministry and also on JDT.
Leah Sarandon, Chair of SCT, and hopefully not a misfit.
Tom Kramer, I'm an Associate Executive Presbyter on the Presbytery staff. I serve as liaison to the SCT and also to the trustees.
Kathy Sizer, I'm on council and also on a JDT.
Cheryl Rain, I'm also on council and I also serve on a JDT.
Steve Wright, I serve on SCT.
I'm Nancy Pearson, and I have been serving on SCT, and that's why I'm here, and also the moderator-elect.
Bill Peck, trustee on the finance team.
Lanny Hawkinson, moderator of trustees.
Steve Yamaguchi, Presbytery pastor.
I'm Bruce Boyer, Presbytery moderator, also on SCT, but here primarily for decoration, I think.
Wow, leave me speechless. Forrest Claassen, I'm the stated clerk and the person who is continuing to herd the cats. All right, let's begin with Bill.
Being the new kid on the block, you know what happens, you get invited to speak. My day job is an investment banker and I negotiate mergers and acquisition transactions. And there's some things that happen there that are happening here. They have a buy side, they have a sell side. The 10 joint discernment teams here have a church side, have a presbytery side. Typically in that process, in the early stages, there's a little dance back and forth, people trying to get comfortable with each other, learn about each other, and that would be what I would expect happened in the early stages of the joint discernment team meetings. The process then moves to an understanding. In the business world, it's called a letter of intent, but in your joint discernment teams, that's the point where you say, okay, I think we know where this is going, we're comfortable, there's not any kind of a schism, and then there's a coming together and say, all right, we have some common goals, how do we work together for that? And then in the business world, that's a letter of intent, but in your world, that's when you say, okay, we're going to work together to get a joint solution. And then in the business world, we go through a period of about 90 days, due diligence, and end up getting to a final decision. We call it a close. In your case, it'll be that joint decision. We're here this morning in the hope that we can help more of the negotiations that are going on be win-win. Talk a little bit about how we can help each other towards the common objective that we have of having joint solutions that work for everybody. Let me mention just one point where I think we can work together. Think of it, 10 teams, 2 sides, 20 groups of people, perhaps independently trying to say, well, what are the comparables out there? What other churches, what have been the financial parameters of other churches that have been dismissed? Doesn't it make more sense that we pool our information, come up with one database that is probably more comprehensive than any of those 20 separate groups could come together, and share it so we all have the same information that we're working from, and it's more efficient. That's some of the ways we can work together. There's another element that we, if you're not aware of it, would encourage you to think about, and that is, how can we work together to make whatever the decisions that happen be as resistant as possible to any kind of an appeal? I think we all know that a dissatisfied component of a local congregation can initiate an appeal. When we come before the vote in the Presbytery, that could be appealed. We certainly saw that a couple of years ago with the ordination standard motion that went up, was upheld at the Synod, but was overturned by the Permanent Judicial Council. So having in mind, what can we do to make whichever way the decisions go, be most resistant to any kind of an appeal, and should there be an appeal, most defendable, and hope that it would stand up, because the lose-lose situation is if there's an appeal. The Presbytery loses, the local congregation loses. Let's share best practices or best thoughts on how we can together improve that. Now back to the business world, the due diligence. When we get close to making a closing, it gets pretty intense, and there's a lot of distraction away from the day-to-day business of the business. And so too has this process of discernment been a big distraction to most of the congregations that are going through it. It's also been a big distraction to the ministry of Los Ranchos Presbytery. So I would encourage all parties, cut each other a little bit of slack. Don't blame each other for the distraction, but say, let's work through this as amiably as we can, and let's work through it as quickly as we can, because the longer the process is protracted, the more distraction it becomes. And then there's some things about managing expectations. Expect the process to be difficult, particularly that part of the process which addresses what are the financial terms. You've got different interests on both sides. Try to stick with the facts as much as you can and keep the emotion out of it. And do look for those win-win situations. So I hope this word of encouragement is received positively, and that the conversations we have here today will prove helpful to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. As you probably received in an email yesterday, the schedule for the morning will flow roughly as follows: questions and answers, a presentation, questions and answers, a presentation, questions and answers. The first set of Q&A that I'm going to encourage for this morning, well, let me back up a step. If you remember, there's this provision in the policy that we're following toward dismissal that it requires the teams to engage with the leadership of the Presbytery, meaning these folks here, on questions of the Presbytery's mission and ministry in this time and place, and the Presbytery's obligation as a fiduciary to the denomination and the denomination's role as a beneficiary to the property of the churches. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish here, is to make that engagement happen this morning. So the first bank of Q&A that I'm going to propose is that we focus on that mission piece. What is the mission of the Presbytery in this time and place? How does the Presbytery embody the larger church? Then we'll have a presentation on the financial situation of the Presbytery in particular that'll come from the trustees, with an opportunity for serious Q&A there. And then a presentation on the polity of the matter, the trust clause in the Book of Order, with another opportunity for Q&A there, and then kind of wrap up with general, whatever you have left on your mind time, and close with worship. I'm imagining that each of these should take just about an hour, including a little bit of break time in between each one. So what I'd like to encourage you to do now is begin with the questions that are on your mind, particularly as they pertain to the mission of the Presbytery. You know, what is the Presbytery here for? Why do we have one at all? Some of those kind of things. Work on those on your cards. If the questions include things like, what does this have to do with us anyway? That's a perfectly appropriate question to put. But take about 5 minutes right now. Think about what's on your mind. Put each individual thought on a separate index card. If you need more, let me know. And then I'll ask for them to come forward, and we'll begin then to parse out those questions among the leadership team. Does that work for you? Okay. We are idealistic and aiming for a win-win solution. But given that mission and money are wrapped up in each other, isn't it more realistic to aim for less loss, less loss?
Somehow I feel that my opening comments didn't quite get across the idea. We're trying to start this out on a positive tone and work towards a win-win. Now I find myself we're going to lose-lose. It's difficult to go through a division of anything, a household, a business, a church, and have a net positive outcome. And I think that's just the reality. Minimizing the loss, we can do that by really working to work together in a cooperative spirit. Pardon me if I keep going back to my day job because I see so many parallels between the negotiations that the teams are involved in. One of the hurdles that's difficult to overcome in many negotiations is getting each side of the negotiation to have insight into what the perspective of the other side is, and then gain some appreciation that we have differences. There are two sides, and both sides say, I believe my side is right and should prevail, and the other has that same view. A spirit of cooperation will minimize losses that may come about. Some churches will have members that say, well, whichever way the decision goes, I'd rather go to a church that is more in line with my personal views. So there's some risk of loss in the local congregation. There are things that you can do in your local congregations. There's one congregation that's going through this process that has something that's called a togetherness team. So that's something that can be done to minimize the loss in the local congregation. Now let's move over to the Presbytery. What can be done to minimize the loss in the Presbytery? And we're going to lose, give or take, $250,000 a year of income. Spreading that over a period of time is certainly going to be one of the things. Having continuing relationships between local congregations, even if they choose to be dismissed, that continue in some way, and I'm thinking non-financial ways to support the Presbytery. There may be opportunities where both local congregations and the Presbytery have some shared goals. One that comes to my mind, this Presbytery's had a long history of new church development. Started out with Mood, Mission on Our Doorstep, some 30 years ago, and then we went to Joining Hearts and Hands. Those were two capital raise projects, and then we've had some sale of church properties. Some of that goes to starting new congregations, new worshiping communities. That's a goal that I would think most of the congregations that are thinking about dismissal would be interested in, particularly if they're going to ECO, and ECO has what they'll call a missional church planning, and your local churches may not have that vision or that capability, but look to 30 years of history to Los Ranchos Presbytery, which has done that very effectively. These are some of the ways that I think we minimize the losses.
Okay, thanks, Bill. We're going to begin the mission part of the conversation with a question here that many of you will probably regard as a softball and get more to the meat as it goes along, but I think this is worth hearing the answer from the folks up front. Please share the mission of the Presbytery and how the Presbytery plans to carry that mission out in the next 5 years. So immediate, first of all, how does the Presbytery plan to do that in the next year or so? And then how does it plan to do it through about 2020? I'm wondering whether that is a question for the SCT or for the Executive Presbyter.
Start with the executive.
Okay.
I'm glad to do that. And if I could, Mr. Clerk, just tag one thing on to what Bill shared. I think in response to the question of whether we're talking about seeking win-win or less loss, I think that depends on how we view the relationship that we'll have in the future. If we see each other, if we see each other as participants in two different expressions of the Church of Christ, the Kingdom of God, then it's possible that imagination can allow us to figure out how to practice and see what's happening as new kinds of wins for the Kingdom of God. If we see each other, though, as, or if the PCUSA is seen as an enemy from whom we have to get away and with whom we want to have nothing to do anymore, then I think there's no other way than to see it as trying to minimize losses on both sides. But what I hear from most people is a desire to imagine creatively how to work together in the future wherever we can, at least at the Presbytery level. So the Presbytery will continue to seek to support its congregations for growth and for in a new way, focusing on reaching those who are outside of the reach of the church currently. You hear some of this in the talk about fresh expressions, but that is not only talking about creating new things, it's talking about training our leaders in our congregations to become more effective, more articulate, more spiritually mature, and more passionate about reaching those who are not within the reach of the church right now. And that is one of the things that we are investing in and hoping to do together, even in conversation with ECO, hoping to do that together in the future. But we are committed to nurturing the strength of congregations and helping congregations be connected with one another within the Presbytery, and a new and a very important emphasis is helping us as churches of the Presbytery to be more connected with other churches, not just other PCUSA churches, but churches of other denominations in our regions, that we would become known as the people who help Christians get together, who instigate and initiate partnerships among different Christians ecumenically. We will continue to serve our congregations in times of crisis and in times of transition, as we consistently do, and we will continue to seek to lead in thinking theologically about what it means to be Christians and churches in this post-Christendom era that we're living in. That's a framework, Mr. Clerk, and I think I would hand it over to SCT.
Thank you. That's what I had down here to say too, so this is good. You know, the very fact that the sizes of our congregations will be relatively smaller, proportionately, to me begs the question that we're really going to need to be together and to do ministries that fit into our framework, into our core value system. And so I see partnership and I see collegiality being really necessary and even more effective and becoming stronger. Now, one of the things that I think about is something that I had a privilege of helping with on the pastor nurture team, and that was to get pastors connected in covenant groups or small groups, whatever you want to call them. Now they're life groups, they have all kinds of names, but they're all about the same thing. And one of the things that I was able to see was how strong the pastoral support groups were to each other. They weren't perfect, but they were strong. I don't see pastors divorcing themselves from the groups that they've been a part of. And that's where a lot of conversation takes place, to really find out where they are as pastors and where they might need to go and what they might need to do and to be. I do see that another important thing that so often we neglect is that we underestimate the power of our laity in the churches. One time about 20 years ago, a member from St. Andrews said, "Lydia, you think we're stupid. We are more theologically savvy than you think we are." And I always took that as a very important thing for me to note, that our job is to build and equip and to train leaders in the church for their effective ministry. That's right out of Ephesians, as you know. And so I see the nurture, the training, the equipping of both pastors and leaders in the church to be one way that we can build from the inside out and continue to do so. I find myself thinking about that all the time. And that is that we have incredible people in our congregations. Let's face it, Presbyterians are so smart. They're educated, they know what they're doing, and they know who they are, and they're waiting to be used. In SCT, the list, and if you want it, it's before you, of about 80 ministries that we are supporting and will continue to support, as Steve said. And those ministries need us, and we need them. And as they partner together and become stronger, I think it can happen. Now, there's another thing that's on my heart a lot, and I guess because I was born before most of you here were born. As pastors, we need some fire in our bellies, and we can never let that fire die out. To just keep that life inside of us burning with passion for people who need to come to Jesus. And we need the fire to keep learning and growing and maturing. And no matter how hard it seems, we're never going to be too old to learn and to grow and to be effective, because that's our biblical history. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just feel to listen to congregations, communicate the opportunities that are already out there. Most congregations don't know what's out there. At least I still don't. To assist them in developing leaders and lay leaders, both pastoral and the lay, and then to take that fiduciary responsibility to give the money away where we know it's going to work best and where it's going to be most effective, and attaching to that some very, very intentional accountability of where it goes, how it is spent, and where it needs to be improved. Does that answer it in a little way? Whoever says yes or no?
let me just add one comment, and that is that our delivery system for being a learning and missional community is gathering people together in forums where they can learn and where they can pray and where they can be inspired. And so what we've done, even through the dismissal process, you've seen a lot of energy and focus going to questions around missionality and our theological distinctives and denominational alignment, which is kind of up front and center here. But what we're trying to do, and the investment we'll be making over the next several years, is be extremely strategic and intentional about those forums so that we can presence Jesus in our communities differently, so that we can be on mission in our communities differently than we have been before. And to that end, we're going to be investing heavily over the next several years. How do we bring people, she mentioned lay people, leaders, people with hearts to bring the good news of Jesus? How can we bring them together to learn the new skills they need for a culture that by and large thinks the established church or the inherited church is irrelevant? And so, how do we get retooled? How do we get retrained? Well, we have these forums, it's our delivery system, and in partnerships, we spotlight what's already happening expertly in congregations, in people's lives, and we continue to lift those up in a really compelling way. And that's what we're about. We're a learning and missional community. And now we can invest that. We've been through this season of discernment, which has been a challenging season. Bill Peck, I think, spoke so well of how challenging that was and how we could, say, oh, what a waste. But here we are. It's a new day, and we have this opportunity to invest. Just one slight correction in terms of the handout we have. The strategic coordinating team has very clear values and grant applications, which are also available to you today if you'd like. But I have for you a spreadsheet, if you'd like, all 79 of the investments we've made in leadership training, in new church development, in congregational redevelopment. You can think of the 12 churches who have gone through new beginnings to identify and articulate their future story. Some of these churches have been in decline membership-wise. And so now they're articulating, they're going through this process. We're saying, we have to make some major changes. And so 12 of our congregations have gone through that. These are the sorts of investments we make. They're delineated on the spreadsheet that I have. Should we distribute them? They're open for everyone, of course. And the SCT works so hard to analyze and evaluate every request. Is it going to help our congregations? Is this request going to help our leaders be on mission and equip others to be on mission for Jesus Christ?
If I could venture one last thought, and this is something that we don't like to lead with, rather not talk about it sometimes, because we're on the positive end, we are committed to cultivating maturing disciples for Jesus Christ for mission. But there is a dark side of things too that the Presbytery is a part of. As a Presbytery together, as Reformed Christians, we believe in the fall and in sin. And we seek collectively to constrain sin, and when it happens, to respond in redemptive ways. The Presbytery will continue to be, with all the resources it has, available to its churches to help churches in crisis. Some of your churches have had very significant issues related to pastoral conduct or misconduct or divisions, and some have had some very thorny issues related to the transitions of pastors. We as a Presbytery gather the gifts of many people, staff and volunteers, who respond to the Committee on Ministry and special response teams and the sexual misconduct response team. And we have the collected wisdom of many years of effectiveness in this, and we are happy to share this with each other. Last year, to use ECO as an example, last year there was a situation where ECO had to respond to some concerns about sexual misconduct, and it was parallel to a situation we were involved And as I watched their process unfold, it made me cringe, and it made me fear that they would create more legal complications in their process because they simply didn't have the infrastructure to respond, and they were just trying things out, calling people up to talk to things in a very informal way that could have been even legally very difficult. One of the things that we will continue to do is practice excellence in these things, and I look forward to sharing these things. But I do think this is one of the things that we have to even share with a new denomination, and which is part of what is the pastoral provision of affiliate membership, of the notion that we flew at the last Presbytery meeting. But we have a richness of resources responding in complex crises that are earned over many years, and those are something we'll continue to do, and we will continue on to share with others, especially ecumenically.
Thank you all. I want to put a question back to this group now, because my sense is that I've heard an answer to it, but if you posed the question and didn't sense that you heard an answer to it, I want you to signal as much. There are a couple of cards here that indicate a request for clarification or information regarding the relationship of the Presbytery's mission to the local churches, and in particular, how the Presbytery's mission supports the local churches in their mission. For the people who posed a question like that, can I see sort of a yes or a no? I see a thumbs up. I see, okay, all right, we're going to skip on then beyond those in the sense that they seem to have been covered. The next one then focuses it down a little bit. Let me go ahead and put this one back to you as well, though my sense is that there may be more to say. The question in particular is, what is the vision and strategy of the Los Ranchos for evangelization, church planting, and or new communities of faith within its bounds? The person who posed that, do you feel like that one's been met, or would you like to hear more? Met? Okay. Does anybody want to say more on that subject, or are we pretty good there? Okay. This one I found interesting because it never would have occurred to me to ask, so I like the fact that you did think of it. Explain, please, how the mission of Los Ranchos Presbytery relates to the mission of other denominations, especially other Reformed denominations. Is our mission supported when congregations and assets are dismissed to other denominations?
Can you say that last phrase, please?
The second of the two sentences?
Yes.
Is our mission supported when congregations and assets are dismissed to other denominations? Steve is about the only one who isn't avoiding eye contact right now.
Well, not only not avoiding, I mean, I'm eager to respond. I just don't want to hog the microphone here. But I am eager to respond because I do think that there are some profound things in this question, or in these two questions. In some ways, we have done very poorly historically in relating to other Reformed denominations. Some of that is because other Reformed denominations have been very unfriendly toward us, and they left us angrily, and believing that we were very mistaken, say on the ordination of women or a number of other things. However, there are exceptions to that. In terms of the Reformed Church of America, the RCA, we have in fact explored partnerships and even been involved with one another in some things over the past years. Our geographic regions, they call it a Claassen, we call them presbyteries. They don't overlap neatly, so we intersect with multiple judicatories on their parts, but we are getting more creative, and even at a more national level. And I do know that in the spirit of ECO, I have heard people talk about a desire to be collaborative on mission, if separate on governance. I think that and what was the last part of the question again, Forrest? Okay. Is our mission supported when congregations and assets are dismissed to other denominations? I think that's a great question, and I think that depends on how all of us, no matter where we end up, see the mission of God and the work of the Church of Jesus Christ. If we see separate pots that are competitors for limited resources, then I think we can't see it as anything but a loss. But if we see ourselves as partners in the mission of God, partners in the work of the kingdom of God, who are allies in this, who can respect and cooperate, then I don't think we have to see this as a loss or as a net loss to the whole church. There may be a redistribution of assets within the kingdom, but I don't see that it has to be seen as a loss to Los Ranchos, depending on what the relationship is. It depends on what the relationship will be.
Let me give you just one anecdote. On January 14th through 16th, I was here at this church back in the fellowship hall where we enjoyed coffee this morning, and leaders from Rock Harbor, Vineyard churches, Calvary churches, 3 of our congregations in Los Ranchos, an Episcopal church, a number of us, over 50 leaders from these congregations, were going through a process to help train our people to awaken to their missional calling. Well, a Presbyterian congregation stepped up for Church Resource Ministries and hosted that meeting, that gathering of leaders right here in this place. And so there are so many different ways that we can offer what God has blessed us with, whether it be a facility like this, or leadership, or just the sense of welcome that Presbyterians, I think, are known for, because we're so curious, intellectually, theologically. And what a place for leaders from those congregations, Calvary Chapel, to come here and to receive that training. And so I think we can facilitate, we can broker those sorts of experiences so that the kingdom of God will be exhibited through all of us.
If the affiliate status for congregations is approved, how could this be documented as supporting the Presbytery of Los Ranchos' mission? I wonder if that one would be one that I ought to field, since I am guessing that the question here is really about documenting. Is that fair?
Yes.
Give me okay. That's the way that I would propose that be done is that in the joint resolution that your team come up with, if you choose to include an intention toward affiliate membership, raise your hands if you're not familiar with affiliate membership as it came up in Presbytery last month. Okay, that's few enough hands that grab me individually, and I'll explain that to you on a break. If a church is committed to an affiliate membership, provided that the Presbytery makes room for that, it could very well be something that's written into the joint resolution with specific commitments to how the church would then be living out that affiliate membership, and in particular with reference to aspects of the Presbytery's mission that the church would want to continue in relationship with. So for instance, if there is a specific new church ministry that your church is excited about that will remain within the Presbytery, but you still want to be in partnership with it, that would be the sort of thing that would be specifically written into the joint resolution. Similarly, affiliate status would be the sort of thing where you'd say, we plan to become affiliate members if this becomes an option. Does that kind of get at how it would be? The reality is you have lots of opportunities in the framework that Neil Wells wrote up for you around how to lay out this agreement to add items 6, 7, 8 through 20 or whatever, saying these further things will apply in our relationship going forward. about 6 more minutes before I'm going to recommend a first break. The one thing I'll mark to you here is I recognize, you can see I've been kind of creating stacks here. These are not questions to ask first, questions to tear up and throw away and hide, and everything in between. They're questions of different categories of conversation that will probably be coming up in the course of the morning at different times, so I'm trying to keep them organized. A few more minutes on the mission, and then I think we'll probably be ready for our first break while the trustees set up for their presentation. There are a couple of cards here that essentially ask the question, how would you expect the mission of the Presbytery to change if all of the churches seeking dismissal are dismissed? Let's take a poll again. If you asked a question like that, give me another round of, did that one get answered earlier? I think I heard a little bit of that in Lydia's response. Okay, I'm seeing a sort of, I want to hear more. Okay, so yeah, if all the churches are dismissed, let's take that in 2 pieces. One is, how would the mission of the Presbytery itself change? But then perhaps how would the execution of that mission have to be adjusted? Because I think there are 2 separate things there.
Well, certainly, in a sense, we are your servants as your staff members at the presbytery level. And because we expedite and we broker and we stimulate conversation, and sometimes we referee conversations, which is usually fun because people are using their imaginations to think of new ways to be on mission. There's going to be less resources down the road for that. And to the extent that we add value to do that sort of brokering and expediting and initiating and coaching, there's going to be less of that. However, our mission, as far as I can understand, the ethos of this presbytery will not change. We're going to continue gathering people to learn together and to be on mission. It may be in a smaller scale, but I don't see us wavering from that because we have so much to learn right now. And I think that's the beauty of our new mission design. That's the hope that we have, that God has given us everything we need to carry out our mission. Whether we're 10 churches smaller, who knows what will spring up in the next 10 years. Already there's a number of congregations, actually, not communities rather, that are beginning, and they want to be part of this enterprise. And so it's going to be different. It may be smaller in terms of our ability, our bandwidth to broker and stimulate and initiate. And others who are colleagues in ministry on the strategic coordinating team may feel that we've served to that end as their staff and obviously council and now the generative catalyst team. But I hope that at the end of the day, anyone who comes into contact with any of us feels like they've helped me do ministry more effectively. And so we're, in a sense, we're mission co-workers. It's just happened that the mission of God is right here in this, 10 million people metropolis in which we live. So that's the way I would respond. I hope it was somewhere focused on an answer to the question.
You know, to insert this little caveat here, what an opportunity is to start getting on our knees and praying for more workers to work in the harvest. I believe that prayer is a very important part in this whole mission endeavor. So let's not ever forget that.
I'm just adding a little bit from a different perspective as a volunteer who serves with the COM and also the response coordinating team. As was alluded to earlier, many services are currently being provided to support sessions, pastors, and congregations. Many of us on the RCT, for example, have been trained in family systems and the Lombard training program. We've been called in on many instances by either sessions and or pastors and sessions to help guide them through some process in terms of smoothing the waters and moving on with the kingdom of God. Currently on the COM, I just did a quick look here. We've got about 15 or 20 activities I could peel off specifically, but I'd just like to highlight a couple in terms of support. Right now we have 13 liaisons out in the churches in our presbytery serving in some capacity. Many of those are working with PNCs and APNCs or IPNCs. Many others are working with sessions directly. Many others are working with subgroups in those churches. In addition to that, we also have 8 NCDs or worshiping communities that are being aided by 2 of our staff members who report directly to the COM also. So that program exists in many different facets and many different fashions. And we're entering an unknown period here, and I have some genuine concerns as a volunteer about what that may look like once this process plays out. I have a concern for the churches who may be going on their own or joining another denomination. Some of that has already been alluded to in terms of what support can they expect in that new environment. That's a concern I have for those folks. And I also have a concern for those of us who will be remaining and how that will look. I understand what Lydia is saying, but I can tell you the volunteering aspect of it is what it is, and it's difficult sometimes to augment that. Also, from a perspective of a volunteer, I'm at that presbytery office several times a week, it seems, for meetings and conferences and discussions with staff. I can tell you personally that that staff is truly being stretched. And I really have a genuine concern as to what that may look like if the resources are also cut back. There's a genuine concern there. I don't know how much more we can get out of the folks who are working there day in and day out. And I have a genuine concern about how the service will look if it has to be altered.
I just want to clarify that when we talk about the resources, we're talking about not only staff, but as Jack alluded, we're talking about the leadership that so many of you and so many people from your churches have provided. And we treasure that. You have been a great strength in Los Ranchos. And that will leave an enormous hole. We've talked about in some of our conversations that yes, we will lose relationships and we'll grieve that. But a piece of that is that we've served side by side with you, and you have given significant leadership to this presbytery. And so, as Lydia said, we need to pray for new leaders to be raised up by God. And we are grieving because we have loved you, and we have loved the way that you've served Christ in our midst.
I'm making out the handwriting on one of these and realizing that it probably should have come up a moment earlier. So I'm going to look back, and then what I'm going to suggest is that we take about a 5-minute break. I'll fill you in on that in a moment, because the answer is pretty quick here. The question is, since the discernment process has highlighted that the issues are with the denomination at the GA level and not Los Ranchos, is the affiliate membership that's being considered by Los Ranchos an attempt to keep community, and I'm going to change the preposition here, to keep community between Los Ranchos and the dismissing churches? I think the answer to that is yes. Okay. There are many questions still here. They will find their answers at the proper place in the morning. I've kind of marked them out as, okay, there's going to be a presentation on this, then we'll pick up these questions. As you have more questions, write them down, pass them over, pass them in.